Karen didn't just demand I leave my own property. She keyed my brand new truck and smashed my front window. But here's what'll make your blood boil. My house isn't even in her HOA. I'm standing in my driveway when this woman in a red blazer storms over like she owns the planet. She snatches my house keys and hurls them into the storm drain, that metallic clang splash, the sound of crazy declaring war. But Karen wasn't done destroying my property. She grabs a landscaping rock and smashes it through my living room window. Glass explodes everywhere. My daughter starts crying. Then this psycho drags her car key down my entire truck, leaving $3,000 scratches in silver ribbons. Her overpowering perfume mixed with fresh-cut grass as she blocks my front door. "You don't belong in Willowbrook Estates!" she screams. Remember this moment. Because what Karen didn't know was exactly who she'd declared war on. And you're going to love watching this woman's world fall apart when she discovers the illegal scheme I'm about to expose. My name's Marcus, 45, recently divorced aerospace engineer who thought he'd found paradise. This 1960s ranch house on 2 acres was perfect space for my daughter Sophia's weekend visits, room for projects, and zero HOA jurisdiction. I'd done my homework, spent weeks researching property lines and deed restrictions. My lot predates Willowbrook Estates by 15 years, completely grandfathered when they built their pristine community around me. The sound of my surveyor's measuring tape clicking against fence posts was music to my ears, proof I was free. Willowbrook Estates surrounds my property like a suburban fortress. $500,000 homes with perfect lawns and identical mailboxes. My house needs work, but it has character. The kind of place where you can actually live instead of performing for neighbors. Karen Brightwell lives directly across from me in a $750,000 colonial. HOA president for 8 years, real estate agent, drives a white BMW with HOA PREZ vanity plates. She literally made her identity about controlling other people's property. 2 weeks before moving day, Karen appeared during my final inspection. Didn't introduce herself, just started listing violations. Paint too bold, garden shed unpermitted, tree branches blocking sight lines. When I explained HOA rules don't apply to my property, her face went purple. We'll see about that. She marched back to her BMW, heels clicking against my concrete driveway like gunshots. This house devalues the entire neighborhood. The next week, city code enforcement showed up about anonymous complaints. The officer's clipboard smelled like stale coffee as he checked my perfectly legal shed. Took 5 minutes to realize the complaints were bogus, but Karen's message was clear. Moving day arrives. Tuesday, most neighbors at work. Professional movers. Everything smooth. Sophia excited about her bay window bedroom. The diesel exhaust from our truck mixed with wild honeysuckle along my property line, creating this weird contrast between industrial and natural. Then Karen's BMW pulls up. She sits there 10 minutes, engine purring, just watching. I keep working, hoping she'll leave. Instead, she emerges wearing that red blazer like battle armor, marching across with the stride of someone who's never heard no. What happened next? The destruction, the threats. Officer Rodriguez's report was just her opening move. Because after Karen drove away without consequences, one neighbor approached me quietly. "She's done this before," whispered elderly Frank Martinez, glancing around nervously. "Gotten 3 families to sell and move in the past 2 years. You better watch yourself." The smell of fear mixed with fresh mulch from Frank's flower bed. That's when I realized this wasn't a neighbor dispute. This was a pattern. And I was about to discover exactly what Karen Brightwell was really after. Week 1, after the destruction. And Karen wasn't done playing games. She was just getting started. First came the city complaints. Code enforcement showed up 3 times that week. Unpermitted shed, improper drainage, and my personal favorite, excessive vegetation height. Each inspector arrived looking apologetic, clipboard in hand, clearly dealing with the same anonymous complainant. "Ma'am, this is the 4th call this month from this address," Officer Martinez told me after the 3rd visit. "Grass height violation? Your lawn's perfectly normal." The scratchy sound of his pen on the citation pad stopped abruptly when he realized how ridiculous this was. But Karen was organizing. She started a petition among HOA members about investigating property boundary disputes, basically trying to manufacture a legal reason to challenge my ownership. 17 signatures in 2 days, all from people who'd never spoken to me. That's when I remembered something my divorce attorney had told me. When someone challenges your property rights, documentation beats accusations every time. Smart man. I called a professional surveyor that afternoon. Frank Martinez caught me outside the next morning, coffee steam rising from his mug in the crisp air. "You need to install cameras," he whispered, glancing toward Karen's house. She got Mrs. Payton to sell by documenting every tiny thing, pictures, measurements, complaints to every government office in the county. So I did both. Professional boundary survey cost me $800, but worth every penny when it confirmed what I already knew. My property line is 15 feet inside my fence. I'm not even close to HOA territory. I'd read somewhere that property surveys are legal documents that override neighbor complaints. And boy, was that advice golden. Nothing stops harassment faster than official documentation. The cameras went up that weekend. Nothing fancy, just 4 security cameras with cloud backup covering all approaches to my house. Good thing, because by Monday morning I had my first evidence of Karen's true nature. There she was at 6 a.m., sneaking across my lawn with her phone, taking pictures of my garden shed from every angle. The early morning dew soaked through her expensive sneakers as she crept around like some suburban spy, documenting violations that didn't exist on property she had no authority over. But the real shock came Tuesday morning when I checked the overnight footage. Karen's teenage son, Tyler, throwing eggs at my truck in the middle of the night. Then Karen herself, dressed in dark clothes, cutting my garden hoses with wire cutters. The smell of sulfur from rotten eggs mixed with my morning coffee created this nauseating combination that perfectly captured how surreal this situation had become. I had her dead to rights. Trespassing, vandalism, harassment, all recorded in crystal clear HD with timestamps. Time for my counterpunch. I printed still frames from the footage and walked them over to Frank Martinez. His eyes widened as he saw Karen sneaking around my property. "She did the same thing to the Johnsons 2 years ago," he said. "Made them remove their kid's swing set because it was too colorful." The texture of the photo paper felt thick between my fingers as Frank studied Karen's midnight vandalism spree. This wasn't random neighbor drama. This was calculated harassment with a pattern. That afternoon, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting about the problem next door. 30-plus residents showed up to the community center, most just wanting gossip. Karen had prepared a full slideshow presentation, photos of my property taken while trespassing, complaints about paint colors, concerns about declining property values. I showed up uninvited with my surveyor's report and trespassing footage on my laptop. The meeting went silent when I played the video of Karen cutting my hoses. Her face went from confident to panicked in about 3 seconds. The clicking sound of nervous pens against clipboards filled the awkward silence as residents realized their HOA president was caught red-handed breaking the law. Several residents approached me afterward, apologizing and sharing their own Karen horror stories. The Johnsons quietly mentioned they'd been thinking about quitting the HOA entirely. Frank Martinez introduced me to 2 other families who'd had run-ins with Karen's enforcement tactics. Karen's harassment had just backfired spectacularly. What she meant to be my public humiliation became her exposure as a trespassing vandal. I walked home that night knowing I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Week 2, and Karen was getting desperate. When public humiliation doesn't work, apparently you escalate to financial warfare. She filed a complaint with my homeowner's insurance claiming my oak tree threatens her property and demanding I remove it. The tree's been there for 40 years, perfectly healthy, nowhere near her house. But insurance companies hate liability claims, so they sent an inspector. Then she contacted my mortgage company claiming fraud in my property purchase, told them I'd misrepresented the HOA status, and that my house was actually subject to their covenants. Complete lies, but mortgage companies also hate fraud claims, so they sent their own investigator. The sound of official documents sliding through my mail slot became a daily anxiety trigger. Each envelope brought some new bureaucratic nightmare Karen had unleashed on me. But her masterpiece was the safety patrol. Karen recruited volunteers from the HOA to take neighborhood security walks past my house every 2 hours. Groups of 3 or 4 neighbors with clipboards, photographing me washing my car, working in my yard, getting my mail. They'd stand on the public sidewalk just outside my property line, making notes and whispering. Leading this parade of busybodies was Brad Kellerman, a new resident and unemployed former cop who'd moved in 3 months ago. Karen appointed him security coordinator, and he took the job seriously. Brad organized the patrol schedules, distributed clipboards, and generally acted like he was running surveillance on a criminal enterprise instead of watching a guy mow his lawn. The smell of freshly cut grass should be peaceful. Instead, it mixed with the tension of being constantly watched, creating this weird suburban dystopia where yard work felt like a performance. I called my insurance agent directly to get ahead of Karen's tree complaint. Janet Wu had been handling homeowners' policies for 15 years and had seen it all. "Oh, we have a flag on this address now," she said casually. "Karen Brightwell has filed complaints against 6 properties in the past 3 years. We actually have an internal note about her." That was enlightening. Janet quietly advised me to document everything Karen was doing. "Insurance fraud is serious business," she said. "When someone files false claims repeatedly, that's a pattern we investigate." I'd learned in my engineering training that patterns reveal intent, and Karen's pattern was becoming crystal clear. Wednesday afternoon, I'm playing catch with Sophia in my front yard when Brad approaches with his clipboard, and that swagger cops never lose, even former ones. The leather of his jacket creaked as he walked, trying to look official. "Sir, I need to see proof of residence and property tax receipts," he announced, like he was serving a warrant. Sophia stopped mid-throw, softball frozen in her glove. The tension in Brad's voice made my 15-year-old daughter nervous, and that pissed me off more than anything Karen had done yet. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice level. "We've had reports of suspicious activity. I need verification that you belong in this neighborhood." His hand moved to his phone, clearly planning to record our interaction. Then Brad made his mistake. "You people don't belong in this kind of neighborhood anyway." The softball hitting my glove stopped. Even Sophia heard it. "You people." There it was, the real motivation behind all this harassment finally spoken out loud. I pulled out my phone and started recording Brad. "Could you repeat that 'you people' comment for my attorney?" Brad's face went white. Former cop or not, he knew he'd just made a discriminatory statement on camera. He backed away, stammering about misunderstandings and taking things out of context. Too late. I had it recorded, time-stamped, with my daughter as a witness. That evening, the Johnson family officially quit the HOA. Frank Martinez started openly greeting me despite Karen's death glares from across the street. 3 more families privately expressed their frustration with Karen's reign of terror, their words, not mine. Karen's safety patrol was falling apart. When residents realized their HOA president was orchestrating harassment campaigns instead of organizing block parties, the volunteer enthusiasm dried up quickly. By Friday, only Brad was still walking patrol routes, looking increasingly ridiculous as a one-man surveillance team. The texture of rebellion felt different from compliance. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up were finding their voices. Karen's iron grip on the community was developing cracks, and I hadn't even played my best cards yet. Sunday night, I watched from my kitchen window as Karen paced her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Whatever conversation she was having, it wasn't going well. Time for escalation loop 3. Karen was about to go nuclear. Week 3, and Karen decided to go nuclear. When harassment and intimidation fail, apparently you lawyer up and try to destroy someone's life systematically. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. Karen's attorney turns out it's her brother-in-law, which should have been my first red flag, sent a cease and desist claiming I was harassing HOA members by documenting their trespassing. The legal letterhead smelled like expensive paper and desperation, but that was just the appetizer. Thursday morning, 2 police cars showed up at my house. Karen had filed a report claiming I aggressively approached and threatened her during an inspection of community boundaries. Complete fiction, but Officer Rodriguez had to respond anyway. "Marcus, I'm sorry about this," Rodriguez said quietly as he took my statement. "This is the 12th complaint she's filed this year. We're starting to see a pattern here." The way he emphasized pattern told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking Karen's claims. Then came the business boycott. Karen started pressuring local shops to refuse my business. The coffee shop owner looked uncomfortable when I walked in Friday morning, avoiding eye contact while making my usual order. The dry cleaner actually apologized under his breath. "Nothing personal," he whispered. "She threatened to organize a boycott if we serve you." The sound of the cash register drawer slamming shut felt more final than it should have. This wasn't just about my property anymore. Karen was trying to make me a social pariah in my own neighborhood. That's when Frank Martinez stepped up in a way I'll never forget. He knocked on my door Saturday morning with his daughter Rosa, a paralegal who specialized in real estate law. Rosa had been watching Karen's harassment campaign from a distance and offered to help research Karen's legal history. "My dad's been dealing with this witch for 6 years," Rosa said, spreading legal documents across my kitchen table. "Let me show you something interesting." What Rosa discovered changed everything. Karen had sued 4 neighbors in the past 5 years, all properties that bordered the HOA. All cases settled out of court with families moving away. The pattern my engineering brain had been sensing finally had hard data to support it. Rosa found public records showing Karen's real estate company had purchased 3 of those 4 properties after the harassment campaigns, always for significantly below market value, always from families who just wanted the nightmare to end. I remembered reading about predatory real estate practices in a housing law article years ago. Systematic harassment to force below-market sales isn't just unethical, it's fraud. When someone orchestrates problems to create distressed sales, that's market manipulation, plain and simple. "She's been running a scam," Rosa explained, the rustle of legal papers punctuating her words. "Harass families until they sell cheap, then flip the properties for profit." Meanwhile, Karen escalated to social media warfare. She created posts in neighborhood Facebook groups about the dangerous new resident, with heavily edited photos making my property look like a junkyard. She started fake accounts to amplify her complaints, posting inflammatory comments about declining property values and suspicious activity. The glow of phone screens became weapons as neighbors read Karen's propaganda, trying to decide what to believe. But social media cuts both ways. When Karen posted an obviously doctored photo claiming my shed violated building codes, Beth Williams, a professional photographer who lived 2 streets over, called her out publicly. "This image has been manipulated," Beth commented. "The perspective is impossible from that angle." Karen immediately kicked Beth out of the Facebook group for spreading misinformation. Big mistake. Censoring a respected community member triggered a mass exodus. 15 families left Karen's groups within 24 hours, and Beth created a new group called Willowbrook Neighbors without Karen as administrator. The taste of freedom from constant surveillance was intoxicating. 40-plus families joined Beth's new group by weekend, sharing their own Karen stories and organizing actual community events instead of harassment campaigns. Karen realized she was losing control of the narrative she'd spent years building. Her carefully constructed image as community protector was crumbling as neighbors started talking to each other instead of through her. Sunday evening, I watched from my deck as Karen stood in her driveway, screaming into her phone. Even from across the street, her gestures looked frantic, desperate. Whatever conversation she was having wasn't going well. Frank Martinez appeared at my fence line with 2 cups of coffee. "Rosa found something else," he said quietly. "You're going to want to see this." The midpoint revelation was about to change everything I thought I knew about this fight. Rosa's discovery hit me like a freight train. She spread the documents across my kitchen table Tuesday morning, her hands trembling slightly with excitement, or maybe anger. "Marcus, this isn't random neighbor harassment," she said, organizing papers into neat stacks. "Karen's been running a systematic real estate fraud scheme for years." The evidence was damning. Rosa had pulled property records, lawsuit filings, and real estate transactions going back 5 years. The pattern was so obvious I couldn't believe nobody had connected the dots before 2019. Karen harassed elderly Mr. Peterson with constant code complaints until he sold his corner lot for 15% below market value. Karen's real estate company bought it 3 days later. 2021. She filed frivolous lawsuits against a young couple with twins, claiming their playground equipment violated community standards. They sold after 6 months of legal bills. Karen's company purchased their property for $40,000 under market value. 2023. The systematic harassment of Mrs. Payton that Frank had mentioned. Constant complaints about her garden, her fence, her foreign decorations. Mrs. Payton sold and moved in with her daughter. Karen bought the property for $50,000 below market. "She's made over $200,000 in profit from these forced sales," Rosa explained, the smell of fresh printer toner rising from the documents. "But your property is the real prize." Rosa had discovered that Karen tried to buy my house before I did. She'd made a low-ball offer that the seller rejected. My 2-acre lot, if subdivided properly, could accommodate 3 luxury houses worth over $1 million combined. That's why she's so desperate, Rosa continued. If she can't force you out, she loses the biggest payday of her entire scheme. The smoking gun was an email chain Rosa had obtained through public records requests, Karen and her realtor partner discussing my property before I'd even moved in. Once we drive out the airplane guy, we can grab this for $200,000 under market, Karen had written. The 2-acre lot can be subdivided into 3 premium parcels. Easy 6-figure profit. The email was dated 1 week before my moving day. Before the destruction, before the harassment, before any of this started. Karen had planned my removal before I'd even unpacked my first box. My coffee went cold as I processed the scope of Karen's operation. This wasn't a personality conflict or neighbor dispute. This was organized crime disguised as community activism. Frank Martinez confirmed Rosa's findings when she shared them with him. She tried the same thing with me in 2018, he said, nodding grimly. Filed complaints about my fence height, my mailbox color, even my dog barking. When I didn't cave, she moved on to easier targets. The Johnsons had their own story. We almost sold too, Mrs. Johnson admitted. She made our lives hell for months. Only reason we stayed was stubbornness. But Rosa's research revealed something even more disturbing. Karen's targeting wasn't random. She specifically went after properties owned by minorities, elderly residents, young families, or anyone who looked like they couldn't afford a prolonged legal fight. The discrimination was systematic and deliberate. The texture of the legal documents felt heavier knowing what they represented. Not just harassment, but organized predation disguised as neighborhood protection. This explains everything, I said, pieces clicking into place. The insurance complaints, the mortgage fraud claims, the business boycotts. She's not trying to maintain property values, she's trying to crater mine. Rosa nodded. Classic market manipulation. Create artificial problems to force distressed sales, then profit from the damage you caused. I thought back to something I'd learned in business school about real estate fraud patterns. When someone systematically targets vulnerable property owners with harassment campaigns followed by below-market purchase offers, that's textbook predatory behavior. The fact that Karen was using her HOA position to legitimize the harassment made it even worse. We need to go to the authorities, Rosa said. This isn't just civil harassment anymore, this is criminal fraud. But first, we needed more evidence. Rosa suggested documenting everything we'd discovered and gathering testimonies from Karen's previous victims. We needed to build an airtight case before Karen realized how much we'd uncovered. She's going to escalate when she realizes her timeline is slipping, Rosa warned. Predators get most dangerous when they're cornered. As if summoned by her words, my security system chimed. Karen was in my driveway again, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men in suits stood behind her, looking official and intimidating. The planning phase was over. Time to build our counterattack before Karen made her final desperate play. My garage became mission control. Rosa arrived with legal pads, Frank brought neighborhood history files, and Beth Williams showed up with professional photography equipment. The smell of coffee mixed with the metallic scent of my tools as we transformed my workspace into a war room. First thing, we document everything, Rosa said, spreading color-coded folders across my workbench. Criminal fraud requires overwhelming evidence. She'd researched predatory real estate schemes and knew exactly what prosecutors needed. I'd learned in aerospace engineering that complex problems require systematic solutions. This fraud scheme had multiple moving parts, so our response needed to be equally methodical. Rosa filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission about Karen's practices. Real estate agents can't use harassment to manipulate property values, she explained. It's a violation of professional ethics and state law. When agents systematically target property owners for below-market acquisitions, that's grounds for license revocation. While Rosa handled the legal strategy, Frank coordinated witness testimonies. We needed sworn statements from Karen's previous victims documenting the pattern of harassment followed by forced sales. Beth upgraded my security system with professional-grade cameras and motion sensors. If she's planning something desperate, we'll catch it in 4K, she said, adjusting camera angles to cover every approach to my property. The evidence collection phase revealed the true scope of Karen's operation. I installed cloud backup systems for all recordings, something I'd learned from a cybersecurity article about protecting digital evidence. When dealing with someone willing to commit fraud, you never know how far they'll go to destroy evidence. Rosa created an encrypted digital folder with our complete case file: property records, harassment documentation, financial analysis of Karen's profits, and testimony from victims. The folder grew thicker each day as more neighbors came forward with stories. She threatened to fine us $500 for holiday decorations, one neighbor revealed. Our Christmas lights were supposedly excessive. Made us tear down our kids' treehouse, said another. Claimed it violated sightline requirements that don't even exist. The psychological pattern was consistent. Karen targeted anything that brought families joy or comfort, then offered to help them sell when the harassment became unbearable. Saturday morning, we organized what Frank called the Willowbrook Unity BBQ at the public park. Rosa suggested neutral ground would encourage honest conversations without HOA intimidation. 35 families showed up, double what we'd expected. The sound of children playing mixed with adults sharing serious neighborhood concerns as people realized they weren't alone in their Karen experiences. I thought we were the only ones, Mrs. Patterson admitted, balancing a paper plate of burgers. She made us feel like troublemakers for questioning HOA rules. The texture of community support felt different from isolation. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up were finding strength in numbers. Beth organized media strategy while I handled technical preparations. She contacted a local news reporter who specialized in HOA abuse stories, preparing a press packet with documentation. If Karen escalates to property damage or physical threats, we go public immediately, Beth explained. Community pressure works when legal pressure doesn't. Meanwhile, I discovered Karen was researching property seizure laws through her attorney brother-in-law. My security system had caught her photographing my house from multiple angles, apparently preparing for some kind of legal action. Rosa connected me with attorney Sarah Payton, no relation to Karen's victim, Mrs. Payton, who specialized in real estate fraud cases. Your documentation is excellent, Sarah said, reviewing our evidence. This kind of systematic harassment is prosecutable under federal fair housing laws. I opened a separate bank account for legal expenses, though community members offered to crowdfund costs if needed. Rosa warned that Karen would likely try to drag out any legal proceedings to exhaust my resources. The technical setup included facial recognition software that triggered alerts when Karen approached my property. Audio recording captured all interactions automatically, something I'd learned was crucial for documenting harassment patterns. Cornered predators become most dangerous, Rosa warned as we finalized our preparations. She knows her timeline is slipping. Frank agreed to run for HOA president in the next election, giving us legitimate community leadership. Several families formally petitioned to remove Karen from the board, though we knew she wouldn't go quietly. I deliberately started a home improvement project installing a deck with proper permits and code compliance. Rosa suggested this would likely trigger Karen's final desperate move, giving us more evidence while showing the community that I was investing in staying permanently. Sunday evening, as I organized our evidence files, the smell of fresh lumber from my deck project mixed with anticipation. We'd built the perfect trap. Now we just had to wait for Karen to spring it. Week 4 arrived with Karen in full desperation mode. She'd discovered my growing community support through the grapevine, and her carefully constructed scheme was unraveling faster than she could control it. The sabotage started small. My mailbox mysteriously suffered vandalism overnight, dented with what looked like a baseball bat. My security footage caught Karen's white BMW creeping past at 2 a.m., headlights off, moving at walking speed. Then my garden hoses got cut in 3 places during pre-dawn hours. The metallic snip of wire cutters on rubber echoed through my audio system as I watched Karen, dressed in dark clothes, systematically destroying my irrigation system. But the real escalation came when garbage appeared scattered across my lawn every morning before pickup day. Coffee grounds mixed with rotten food created this nauseating smell that lingered even after cleanup. Karen was trying to make my property look like a dump before the city inspectors she kept calling. Her attorney brother-in-law filed a frivolous lawsuit claiming my deck construction created a public nuisance. They sought a temporary restraining order to stop my perfectly legal, properly permitted project. The sound of Rosa's laughter when she read the filing was worth recording. "This is desperate amateur hour," Rosa said, waving the legal papers. "No judge will grant an injunction against legal construction on private property." She was right. The hearing lasted exactly 12 minutes before Judge Morrison dismissed the case with prejudice and warned Karen's attorney about filing frivolous motions. The taste of victory was sweet, but I knew Karen wasn't done. That's when she tried bribery. Karen appeared at my door Wednesday evening with a forced smile and manila folder full of paperwork. The scent of her overwhelming perfume mixed with evening honeysuckle as she tried to look neighborly. "I have a business proposition," she said, smoothing her blazer. "My company would like to purchase your property for $50,000 over what you paid." I almost laughed. "No thanks, Karen. I like it here." Her smile cracked. "You don't understand the pressures of living here. The community has standards. I could make your life very comfortable somewhere more suitable." "More suitable for whom?" I asked, pulling out my phone to record. That's when her mask slipped completely. "Look, you obviously don't fit in here. Take the money and find somewhere you belong before things get really unpleasant." Rosa's hidden recording device caught every word. Karen had just offered me a bribe to leave, followed by a direct threat. In legal terms, that's attempted coercion. But Karen wasn't finished with intimidation tactics. She started visiting my supporters house by house, threatening HOA violations, increased fees, and social exclusion. The Johnson family received an anonymous letter claiming their children were too loud and faced fines. Frank Martinez found his car keyed in his own driveway. The texture of fear was palpable as neighbors realized supporting me came with consequences. Some wavered, but most got angry. Nobody likes being bullied in their own neighborhood. Meanwhile, I completed my silent preparation phase. Rosa finalized our complaint to the State Attorney General's office with a mountain of evidence. Beth documented all new damage with professional photography that would hold up in court. My media contact agreed to investigate the story if Karen escalated further. Karen launched her final smear campaign across every platform she could access. Social media posts calling me dangerous and unstable, selective video clips edited to make me look aggressive, rumors about my job and divorce spread through neighborhood forums. The glow of computer screens became battlegrounds as neighbors tried to separate truth from Karen's propaganda. But her lies were getting obvious. When you have complete security footage, partial evidence looks pathetic by comparison. Rosa had taught me something crucial about defamation cases. When someone presents edited evidence that's contradicted by complete recordings, it often backfires spectacularly. Karen's selective clips just highlighted how dishonest her entire campaign had been. The breaking point came when Karen realized traditional harassment wasn't working. I had too much support, too much documentation, and too many witnesses. Her usual intimidation tactics were failing because this time her target was fighting back with facts instead of fear. Friday evening, I watched from my deck as Karen paced her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly at my house. Whatever conversation she was having sounded heated even from across the street. Rosa's warning echoed in my mind. She's going to escalate when she realizes her timeline is slipping. By Sunday, 18 families had openly defied Karen's authority. The petition to remove her from the HOA board had 45 signatures. My local news contact confirmed they'd attend the next community meeting. Karen was cornered, desperate, and running out of options, which meant she was about to make her biggest mistake yet. The final escalation was coming, and this time she wouldn't be able to hide behind community authority or legal technicalities. Week 5 brought Karen's last stand, and she was pulling out every desperate trick in her playbook. The woman had completely lost touch with reality, convinced that one final dramatic move could salvage her crumbling empire. She called an emergency HOA meeting for Friday evening, claiming a security crisis threatened the entire community. The official notice, printed on expensive letterhead, warned of immediate danger to property values and resident safety. Karen had invited local police for security purposes without explaining the real situation. What Karen didn't know was that Rosa had infiltrated her planning conversations through a neighbor who'd grown disgusted with the harassment campaign. We knew exactly what Karen planned to present, a slideshow of doctored evidence painting me as a dangerous threat to community welfare. The irony was delicious. Karen thought she was setting a trap, but we'd been building a better one for weeks. Rosa coordinated with the district attorney's office, ensuring an investigator would attend. Beth arranged complete video documentation of the meeting. Frank made sure all of Karen's previous victims would be present as witnesses. My news contact would film everything with a hidden camera. The community center filled with tension as 40-plus residents gathered for what everyone sensed would be a decisive confrontation. The smell of industrial carpet cleaner mixed with nervous energy as neighbors chose sides through their seating arrangements. Karen began her presentation with theatrical flair, clicking through slides of selectively edited photos and out-of-context quotes. She claimed I'd threatened multiple residents, showed manipulated security footage trying to make me look aggressive, and demanded immediate action to protect our community values. The sound of her laser pointer clicking against the projection screen punctuated each false accusation. Karen had rehearsed this performance, believing her usual intimidation tactics would work on a larger audience. Then Rosa stood up with our legal documentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rosa announced, her voice cutting through Karen's presentation, "what you're seeing is evidence of systematic real estate fraud spanning 5 years." The room went silent. Rosa presented our evidence, methodically unedited security footage revealing Karen's lies, financial records showing her profit from forced sales, testimonies from previous victims, and documentation of her systematic harassment campaigns. When Rosa played the complete audio of Karen's bribery attempt, gasps echoed through the community center. The sound of shocked whispers grew louder as residents realized their HOA president had been caught on tape offering money for me to leave and threatening consequences if I refused. Karen's face cycled through emotions: surprise, panic, anger, and finally desperate defiance. "This is all lies," she shouted. "They're trying to destroy our community with fake evidence." But the testimonies began. Frank Martinez described years of harassment. The Johnsons detailed how Karen nearly forced them to sell. Beth Williams explained the systematic intimidation campaign. 8 families provided similar stories, creating an overwhelming pattern of abuse. The texture of community awakening felt electric as residents realized they'd been manipulated by someone they'd trusted with authority. Many had personal stories they'd never connected to a larger scheme. Officer Rodriguez stood up with his own revelation. "Mrs. Brightwell has filed 12 false police reports this year," he announced. "The department has been investigating her for filing harassment complaints, and she's facing potential charges for making false statements to law enforcement." Karen's meltdown was spectacular. She screamed about conspiracies, claimed everyone was paid actors hired to frame her, and accused me of orchestrating an elaborate hoax. The more unhinged she became, the more obvious her guilt appeared. The news reporter captured everything, including Karen's increasingly wild accusations. Social media would have a field day with footage of an HOA president having a complete psychological breakdown on camera. But the real mic drop moment came when the district attorney's representative announced that state investigators were pursuing criminal fraud charges. Karen's real estate license had been suspended pending investigation, and her previous victims would receive restitution from asset seizure. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Karen as president. Frank Martinez was elected interim president by emergency vote. Several families apologized publicly for not acting sooner when they witnessed harassment but stayed silent. Karen stormed out screaming threats about destroying me and my co-conspirators, which only provided more evidence for the criminal case. Her BMW tires squealed as she fled the parking lot, leaving behind a community finally free from her reign of terror. But I knew this wasn't over. Cornered predators don't surrender, they attack. Karen's final desperate move was coming, and it would be bigger than anything she'd tried before. The taste of victory mixed with anticipation as neighbors lingered after the meeting, sharing relief and planning positive changes for our community. We'd won this battle, but the war wasn't finished yet. Karen Brightwell was about to make her last, most desperate play. And this time, the whole world would be watching. Saturday morning brought Karen's nuclear meltdown in spectacular fashion. I was working peacefully on my deck project, Sophia helping me measure boards while Frank and Beth shared coffee on my new steps, when the sound of diesel engines announced Karen's final desperate gambit. A moving truck pulled up to my property line, followed by Karen's BMW and a pickup carrying 4 men she'd hired from a day labor site. the smell of exhaust mixed with sawdust as this improvised army assembled on my lawn. "Stop all construction immediately!" Karen screamed, marching toward my deck like a general leading a charge. "You're building on stolen property, and I'm reclaiming it through citizen's arrest." The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous. Karen genuinely believed she could seize my property through some fantasy legal authority she'd invented in her delusional mind. My security cameras captured everything as Karen grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and started swinging at the deck I'd spent weeks building. The sound of metal hitting wood echoed through the neighborhood as she destroyed my perfectly legal construction project. "This is my future property," she shrieked between hammer blows. "He stole it through fraud and conspiracy." The four hired men looked increasingly uncomfortable as Karen's meltdown intensified. They'd signed up for moving furniture, not participating in property destruction by a clearly unstable woman. Neighbors emerged from houses like prairie dogs, sensing danger. The sound of screen doors slamming mixed with confused voices as 20-plus residents gathered to witness Karen's complete psychological collapse. Then the cavalry arrived. Rosa had monitored my security feeds remotely and called 911 the moment Karen started swinging that hammer. 3 police cars and a local news crew tipped off by Beth converged on my street simultaneously. I stayed completely calm throughout the chaos, continuing to work on my deck while Karen destroyed herself on live television. When the news reporter shoved a microphone toward me, I simply said, "This is why we have property rights in America." Meanwhile, Karen escalated to attacking my truck with the hammer, leaving new dents in the metal while screaming about fake neighbors and paid conspirators. The metallic ring of hammer on steel provided a percussion soundtrack to her madness. Officer Rodriguez arrived and immediately began arrest procedures. Karen resisted, kicking and screaming about police corruption and conspiracy to commit property theft. Her red blazer was torn, her hair disheveled, and her makeup streaked with tears of rage. "You're all paid actors!" she shrieked as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "This whole neighborhood is fake. They hired everyone to frame me." The news reporter captured every word, creating footage that would go viral within hours. Karen's conspiracy theories sounded increasingly unhinged as neighbors she'd known for years became hired actors in her paranoid fantasy. But Rosa delivered the perfect mic drop moment. She appeared with a thick stack of legal documents, walking directly to the news camera with prosecutorial confidence. "The state attorney general is pursuing criminal fraud charges against Karen Brightwell," Rosa announced clearly. She systematically harassed property owners to force below-market sales, then profited from their desperation. She owes over $200,000 in restitution to previous victims. The crowd spontaneously applauded. Frank stepped forward to announce that Karen was permanently banned from all HOA property. Beth organized an impromptu neighborhood celebration for that evening. As Karen was loaded into the police car, still screaming about conspiracies, the district attorney's representative confirmed that a full criminal investigation was underway. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and asset seizure would begin immediately to fund victim restitution. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. A neighborhood that had been terrorized by one person's abuse of authority became a united community in the span of 30 minutes. The taste of liberation was intoxicating, like breathing fresh air after years in a stuffy room. Local news ran the story that evening, and social media exploded with reactions. Karen became a cautionary tale about unchecked HOA power, while my story inspired other harassment victims nationwide to come forward with their own experiences. Property values in Willowbrook actually increased due to positive media attention. Neighborhood stands up to HOA bully was much better publicity than residents live in fear of harassment. The 4 hired men helped me clean up the damage Karen had caused, apologizing profusely for their role in her scheme. They'd realized within minutes that they'd been manipulated by someone having a mental breakdown. As evening approached and neighbors gathered for our impromptu celebration, the sound of children playing mixed with adult laughter for the first time in years. Karen's reign of terror was officially over. But the best part? This was just the beginning of positive change for our community. 1 week after Karen's spectacular meltdown, justice moved with beautiful precision. She pleaded guilty to vandalism, paying $8,000 to repair my truck, window, and deck. The criminal fraud investigation hit her with a $150,000 fine and permanent real estate license revocation. Karen sold her pristine colonial and fled the state like a fugitive, becoming exactly what she'd tried to force on others, someone driven from their home by their own destructive choices. Frank Martinez won HOA president with 98% of votes, the most decisive victory in Willowbrook history. His first act established new bylaws preventing harassment of non-member properties and creating a good neighbor agreement protecting everyone's rights regardless of HOA status. The transformation was magical. The smell of weekend barbecue smoke from my deck replaced the tension that had choked our neighborhood for years. Sophia made friends with kids whose families Karen had terrorized into isolation. Watching children play freely in yards where they'd once hidden indoors brought tears to my eyes. My property value increased 12%, but the real wealth was community connection. Rosa's legal guide, Fighting HOA Harassment, became essential reading nationwide, helping hundreds of families protect their rights. When people document everything systematically, research their legal protections, and build neighborhood alliances, bullies lose every time. Our story sparked a revolution. Over 200 harassment victims came forward after our news coverage, exposing 3 major HOA fraud schemes. The Willowbrook method became the template for fighting systematic neighbor harassment across America. Frank established our Property Rights Defense Fund, helping future residents understand their protections before harassment starts. We created scholarships for housing law students, ensuring the next generation could defend vulnerable homeowners more effectively. The sound of children's laughter replaced whispered fears. Block parties replaced compliance meetings. Neighbors became friends instead of surveillance targets. The texture of genuine community felt warm and welcoming compared to Karen's cold manufactured conformity. Sophia learned life's most important lesson watching me stand up to bullying. "Dad, you showed me that bullies only win when good people stay silent," she said, helping me apply final stain to the deck Karen had tried to destroy. New residents receive welcome packages explaining their rights and providing support contacts. Our community WhatsApp group prevents conflicts through early intervention. Annual meetings focus on connection and problem solving rather than enforcement and intimidation. Karen's perfect ending came when she attempted the same fraud scheme in another state. Her new victims had downloaded our documentation template from social media and recognized her pattern immediately. They filed complaints before harassment could escalate, and Karen faced investigation within days. Predators depend on isolation and ignorance. When communities share information and support each other, these schemes collapse instantly. My 2-acre sanctuary became our neighborhood's heart, hosting movie nights, holiday parties, and community events on the deck Karen tried to eliminate. What she'd targeted for destruction became the foundation for our strongest friendships. The morning sun streaming through my kitchen window catches the sight of Frank watering his garden while waving to the Johnsons walking their dog. Beth photographs a butterfly on Rose's fence for her nature project. This is what community looks like when fear is replaced by friendship. Here's what I need from you. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Your experience might save someone else from harassment right now. Every story shared is another family protected from predators like Karen. Subscribe to HOA Tales for weekly stories about ordinary people defeating corrupt systems and standing up for their rights. Because this isn't just entertainment, it's education in fighting back when authority gets abused. Next week, the parking enforcement officer who didn't know I work for the mayor's office. Trust me, that revenge is even sweeter than this one. Remember your property, your rights, your community. Never let anyone take those away from you.